Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to the show. Today we have on Carrie Hopperstad. Carrie had reached out to me and had asked to share some of the experiences that she started to unpack after her many teacher trainings that she's done with the Baptiste programs. So we'll just leave it at that and let the podcast speak for itself. I hope you enjoy the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back. Today on our podcast, sitting across from me, I have the lovely and amazing Carrie Hopperstad. Carrie and I have known each other for a long time. I was taking her class before I think I was friends with you, was being guided in your classes, and then I started teaching, and then I think that's where the friendship started to manifest a little bit more. I started seeing you in my class, I was in your class, and then we just started chatting, and you're an awesome person. And I love getting to know you and love the conversations that we have. And I was really excited when you reached out to me to have this conversation.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yikes. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. No, I think that we had like a connection from the start. I remember like the first times we had chatted ended up being like really good conversations that weren't like, oh yeah, and the weather's like nice, and so I think it always feels like that with you. So yeah.
And then there's I gotta pay attention to those kind of conversations and those kind of people too, because I believe in reincarnation, right? I do believe in that, and I do believe that those people that you just find that intrinsic, just like you click with, there's a reason. You guys have done this before, and I think there's a familiarity, right? And there's a familiarity that I have with you, and that's great. I find myself drawn to that instead of intimidated by it like I used to be. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
So do you want to give a little history about your background, just kind of like where you're at, how you got into yoga,
Sure.
and then we'll kind of go from there?
Yeah. I don't know how far do you want me back? Do you want me to go? But I can, I'll go back a little bit. Before I found yoga, I spent about 15 years as a TV news producer. And during that time, I found yoga. I was living in Portland, Maine at the time, actually, and found myself in a Baptiste studio.
Okay.
And my first class, it was actually recommended to me by a person that I worked with, a reporter. And I went into this class, and I love explaining it like this. I like simultaneously almost threw up and saw God at the same time. And like that moment instantly changed my life forever. It was like fantastic. A pivot moment, And so I just got hooked, and life happened, had kids, moved out here, and was producing news out here, working the overnights and doing the morning show, continuing to practice, found my home out here at a yoga studio, and then I started to go to the trainings and totally fell in love with it. And really my yoga life and my like news life was not jiving, like going to work every night at midnight and having to like grind that and like always be immersed in murder and war and death and all of the,
right. The just antithesis of yoga, more or less.
Totally. Yeah. So, eventually left that life and taught full time for about 8 years. Yeah,
right on.
And that's kind of the succinct version of how I got into it.
Very cool. And so the trainings you took. What were the trainings?
Yeah, so I went to level 1, Baron Baptiste level 1 and level 2. Level 1 was in Mexico and level 2 was in Texas.
Okay.
So I did and then I did multiple like smaller local trainings.
Okay.
And I'm going to sound today a lot like, I don't know a better way to put this, but I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth.
Okay.
Because I gained a lot.
Right.
I gained a lot and I learned a lot. And also hindsight's kind of 2020. And in looking back at a lot of the stuff that I observed and experienced, it's kind of weird. There's some stuff that just doesn't sit right.
Okay.
And that's kind of why I thought it might be interesting to talk to you about it. And I also realized that this is not a comfortable conversation for people to hear who are still in it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not comfortable to have.
Okay.
Really either, because if you had asked me as recently as like 4 months ago, I'd be here 100% professing like how amazing and like life changing it is, and it is
Right,
like,
yeah.
but at the same time, I think there's some stuff that isn't great.
Right. Okay. And that's the reason why we're here today. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we're here. So, so we're going to talk about some of the trainings that Carrie's gone to, and some of the experiences that she's had, and kind of, let the conclusions be drawn and see where we go from there. Right.
Yeah.
There's the broad brush stroke of the conversation is not just going to land on the trainings that Carrie's had. This carries over into a lot of different types and quote unquote leaders in the yoga community. And the yoga community has a very strong ability to, and not just a yoga community, but to have kind of culty-esque type atmospheres around them, right? And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, right? And again, I'm not making any claims as to specific people's, but these are just experiences that are had, and we're going to talk about that and see what happens. Okay, so. And so there's been a few things about Baptiste that's come out recently. And that's kind of shined a light on some of the practices and some of the teachings and experiences. And this is kind of what's brought it into my scope as well. I'm very familiar, and I think most of us are very familiar with the Bikram kind of controversies and, kind of quote unquote culty stuff that happens there. And, but now we're kind of switching gears into another, so, so what are some of the, what was something that brought you finally to that point of where you're like, oh man, I need to maybe just think about this a different way?
Well, it's funny. I think, and I think I should say, like, I'd like to also, so I've been to several trainings, but more importantly, I've assisted at several trainings. And so kind of got that inside view of like,
not just as a practitioner,
kind of like how the sausage is made. Like you don't want to know how it's made, but it tastes really good. Like that kind of thing.
Analogy,
yeah. Right.
Totally, yeah.
So, I think over the years, like multiple times I'd think to myself, like my gut would say like, this is not right.
Yeah.
Like this doesn't feel good. But at the same time, there's so many people who are like, no, this is right. This is the way we do things. And so it was easy to like overlook that instinctual. Plus, right. I didn't want to doubt it. Like I loved it. And I had spent a shit ton of money, like I didn't want to doubt it.
Yeah.
I had invested a lot of time, money, and time away from my family. So that became easier to kind of quelch those thoughts. But in the last, I would say like 4 months or 5 months, there was this very quiet rumbling of just a couple people, like people, like one or two people that I was very, very close to and really, really trusted, that I felt like I could just reach out and just say the words like, something doesn't feel right. Like I'm starting to remember things and think about experiences that we had that just don't feel right. And they affirmed my like thoughts, and that felt really good.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, these people that were also very, very like higher up in the organization, were confirming my, my gut, basically.
And when you say remember things too, like I get that. I get what that means. And so for me, like, so when you're in a yoga teacher training or any intense training, but for yoga, for example, like there is so much heat involved, so many long days involved, so many practices involved, right? So you could be doing yoga for probably 5 to 7 hours a day, if not longer, in 100+ degree room. Plus you get, content that's being spit at you, all this stuff. So to that point, sometimes like there's so much happening, we don't even realize something that is traumatic or negative or things like that, because there's so many endorphins and chemicals moving in your body, and your body's trying to like resist the heat and cool itself down and all this stuff. That I get that, man. I worked at a teacher training company for 2 years, and there are times like that where things have finally calmed down. I'm like, oh shit, I said that, or that was the experience that just happened. Like, oh man. Okay.
And these are trainings that were 100+ people in these. Yeah. And the heat and the intensity, when you're talking about that many people in a room,
God, man.
it's intense for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep, and this is why I'm going to sound kind of like I'm losing my mind, because I still will. I'm still going to say like, and I got a lot out of it. And I definitely transformed my own life. So that's where I'm going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I, if anything of this whole like revelation experience that we're just starting to talk about that came out of it, that's really great, is it finally like propelled me to get a therapist.
Oh yeah. Right on.
And
Hell
so,
yeah.
which I think everybody should do anyway, but the amazing, that's what he keeps reminding me like over and over and over again. It's like both things can be true.
Yeah.
Like, yes, both things can be true. And it's like, oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It can be like Stockholm syndrome almost, right? Where you start to empathize with your captor, right? But they're still good because it's not only the training by the person that might be questionable doing the training, but you have all these humans around you. That's this positive energy. That's this release that's happening. That's this learning that's happening. So I get what you're saying. Like it can be, you can have negative experiences and positive experiences from the same thing. It doesn't negate one or the other, right? You can definitely find that dichotomy between the two.
Yeah, that's what I'm experiencing. Yeah. It's been a trip for sure.
Yeah.
It continues to be.
I was about to say, do you still find yourself arguing with yourself at times?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And then there's also this the question in my head, and so this will turn into a therapy session, but what was it? What was missing in me or whatever that like made me fall for this?
Right.
But there isn't necessarily. It's a very, very persuasive, very attractive thing to go into. You get love bombed. Everybody's like loving on you, and it's a community built in. Like these are things that people are looking for naturally. Like it's a human need to be part of a community and to be accepted and loved on. So.
And I think that's a hard thing for us as humans too, because you joined everything for the right reasons. We can't beat ourselves up for becoming prey to somebody that is preying on us, right? Because it's very clear what we want and what we desire as humans. We want community, we want to feel loved, we want to feel accepted. And so when you're offering that as a thing, of course you're going to draw people in, right? And if you have negative intentions behind that, that sucks. I'm sorry, but the people that are invited into that still shouldn't be beating themselves up because they're searching for what we're all searching for. It's just you had an access to it that probably a lot of people didn't. If more people had access to it, more people probably would have gone to it too, right? Not necessarily this training, but just things in general, right? So I think, for us, try not to beat ourselves up for being drawn into the thing that we all want, community and love and acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that is the people who are drawn to this sort of thing are people who want to help. They want to help other people. Definitely. I mean, just at the very essence of it, right? Isn't that why we all get into yoga or whatever other, outlet that we have? We want to help other people. And so that's,
find our ways to be of service in our ways, most definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what, so you're starting to come to grips with some of the experiences that you had. What were some of the things that maybe put you in that direction to think like that?
Well, so we started having these conversations, a smaller group of former Baptiste teachers, and really reflecting back on some of the techniques that were used, that are still used in the trainings that we at the time maybe didn't call out or question, but things like trauma bonding, where you're in a group of 100-something people, and you're questioned and really encouraged to share something like some deep, deep pain from childhood, maybe, or adulthood or whatever, and put in that situation to delve like really, really deep in front of like 100 people that you don't even know.
Wow. Yeah. Which, I mean, that's so much work to get to a point to where you can say that out loud to yourself, let alone hundreds of people. And so in those positions...
Well, and plus without having any mental health experts on site that, to help you work through whatever might come up, whatever might be coming up. So I didn't personally feel that myself. I watched that happen in front of me a lot. Yeah. There were many, many times where I would see a person, a member, a participant, like share something like really like deep, deep revelation. Okay. Maybe something surfaced that they didn't remember, and they're just not being the support the mental health support that would be needed for that situation.
Yeah.
There were times too when I would be on an assisting team, and usually when I was on an assisting team, I was in charge of well-being for the participants, which meant like if anything happened physically or mentally to them, that they would come to me and I would help.
Okay.
And I remember just like many times where I felt inadequate in the sense of like this person really probably needs much more support than I can give them, but
Yeah.
I'm it in this situation. So
Wow.
yeah, I actually remember a really good friend of mine who came to a training, and I was the well-being assistant, and he was severely dehydrated. And he came to me, and it was probably like day 5 or something, and you could see his like tongue was black, and he was like not sweating anymore.
Oh, wow.
You know, stuff like that. And all I could really offer him was like, at that point, was like Pedialyte. You know.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
But it was scary. Like I felt nervous.
Yeah. Right.
for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? So were you given like kind of training to be that point of contact for people that were having dehydration or mental breakdowns or mental revelations or any of that kind of stuff?
No. I mean, to put it really bluntly, like
Yeah.
as you started to ask that question, I was thinking, holy shit, how am I going to answer this? No. I mean, I think I got a binder that had in the mail that had some instructions in
Yeah.
it. And the thing, it's hard too, because like, I will tell you that until about 4 or 5 months ago, if somebody asked me what I was the thing that I did in my life that I was the most proud of, like, yeah, besides having my amazing kids,
Right.
that is what I am most proud of. But assisting at those trainings, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
that was some heady shit.
Yeah.
And it was also like, when I look back on it, it didn't take long to get to this point, but assisting at those trainings, you're unpaid. You're working 100 hours a week. You're working from like 5 a.m. till 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
You're getting no sleep. And you have to be on.
Yeah.
On.
Very on.
100,000% the
Yeah.
entire time. And if you're not, the leader of the team will call you out.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's a very, very like, while I was in the middle of it, it felt very like prestigious.
Yeah.
And I was a chosen one. You know what I mean? Like
of
that's how they
course.
play it. And
Yeah.
that's how when I start to look at the dynamics of cults and things like that, it's very it's so in your face.
Right.
Like when you really break it down.
Yeah. What was so besides the prestige of being, the assistant or helper, what was there any kind of compensation, or was there like a level up as far as like training? Like, could you put that on a resume and be like, I assisted with these, and that would look good on yoga studios? Or
It got
something
me
like that?
to like the 500-hour level.
Okay.
So, I mean, if at the very least, and I might have got a t-shirt.
Okay. All right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Like, and in fact, the funny thing is that before you even can be an assistant, back when I was doing this, you were an apprentice, which you had to pay for, and you were working. So you were paying.
You're paying
to work,
okay.
and you had to pay your own flight.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it was like,
Wow.
and you were like complete, just grunt work.
Yeah.
But boy, people did it.
Yeah.
People really wanted that. I did it.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, it's funny to think back on that and how honored I felt and how lucky I felt. And but then now looking back and thinking, what a freaking fool, you know?
Well, I would hope that you did get some good experiential work out of that, but yeah, that definitely sounds like that was taken advantage of kind of moment. And there are some. It's interesting that we're talking about that because there are some corporate yoga places that are coming up now that have part of their teacher training programs that once you complete, and again, you pay thousands of dollars for these teacher trainings, probably $3,500. But after you're done with the teacher training with this specific company, you then have to teach 25 classes for them for free before
Wow.
they'll give you your accreditation, because you have to get the quote unquote experience, right? And like, so part of me, I get it, right? You need experience, but the other part of me is, you just paid $3,000, right, to a place that probably had 10 or 15 people. So that's like 30, 40 grand that company just made. And then they're getting 25 classes out of all of those people for free to teach, which we know is about $50 a class or so.
Yeah.
So for the bottom line of a yoga studio, of course that makes sense, because they're getting free teachers, they're getting a shit ton of money for these trainings, and they're getting people that just know their training. They just know the classes they want to teach. So like, I get it from a business aspect, but from a human aspect, that's shitty. That just sucks.
Are they also counting the hours, those teaching hours, as part of the like 200 hours of training?
I think so.
See, that's even worse, because the people aren't even getting like actually trained.
Right. Yeah. You're just out there doing it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, there's, it's interesting. I'm going to start paying attention to more of these corporate places that are opening up, and just kind of seeing their business models and seeing what's going on with that. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, there's places like, there's a place in California called Black Swan Yoga that is very successful, and are all donation based. They have zero price for their classes. People that can pay. People that don't pay, they don't pay. Mm-hmm. They have top of the line facilities. They have top of the line teachers, and they make it work. And I'm not intimate with their business strategy or their business model, but from what I do know about it, it's basically based off humanity. And I love that. People are making great, their business is successful. They're serving their community in a beautiful way. And it seems like everything's above board.
Yeah, I love that model. Sounds really great.
Yeah.
I've heard of similar models too, where it's the teacher it's a certain cut that the teacher takes from whatever the pot is that they draw in from the classes. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And that, I mean, shit, we were talking about this before we even came up here. That could be a cool way. There's, as yoga is now becoming more commercialized and popularized and corporatized, there are some structures that are going to be probably put into place. And one of the things that I know we're sidetracking a little bit, but the corporate, the pay structure for yoga teachers is kind of imbalanced in a way, and it potential to be imbalanced. And because a lot of it isn't standardized, there can be ways that yoga teachers can look to be taken advantage of, whether that's intended that way or not. It just kind of ends up being that way. So it's good that there are different ways of looking at this, and people are starting to explore those. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's interesting. That's a lot of work to pay for an intern, mm-hmm. and then to have expected on you. Because so you're working from 5 to 1, mm-hmm. and then you're guiding classes, you're guiding people, you're answering questions, you're holding space for all these people, you're helping guide these big energetic release sessions of people, digging up traumatic things in their life and not really meant to deal with those things as they're being brought up. God, that's just a recipe for craziness.
Oh, and then also you can throw in like, there were times when my role was, the title was hydration, where you're literally just in charge of making sure that the leader has the hydration that they need at any given time of the day, whether that's a very specific smoothie made a very specific way, or their tea or their Gatorade or their water, their coconut water, like whatever, and making sure that it's exactly right and placed in the exact right location on the stage or wherever that might be.
So you say what you want about it. That's just the antithesis of yoga. If we're getting to a point to where we're that caught up in what degree our coconut water needs to be at and where it needs to be placed. And I like my top partially cracked so it doesn't get all the pulp out, please. Just a little bit out. You're doing it wrong. I'm sorry, but you're in it for the wrong reasons. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. And again, like at the time I thought it was the most important job in the world.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm getting to deliver this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I would say, I'm going to rephrase that. You're not doing it wrong. The people asking of that of human beings. It's just not a way to live as a human being, to have those expectations of another human being to cater to you like that.
By the way, who's volunteering their time, has left their family just to get you to for their benefit, because they're profiting off of this 100-person plus training.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of fucked up, really, if you think about it. So it wasn't until I started going down, having these conversations with some of my former colleagues there, and then I started diving into the world of NXIVM. And I'm not sure how much you know about Nexium. Oh, okay. Well,
Hit me.
And then really looking at the practices that, so Nexium is a downright cult, like is a cult. The leader, Keith Raniere, is serving time in prison. It starts off as a very much, there's no yoga like involved, but it's almost more like landmarky, where it's a personal growth and development, and you go through certain levels and you pay more money and you pay more money and reach another level and another level. And when you reach these levels, you get a different colored sash and you get to, different responsibilities and privileges and things like that.
Yeah.
And just in a super nutshell of Nexium, it all kind of came to head and blew up when a couple of women left, because there was a very, very private, tight top line group of just women.
Okay.
And they were getting branded. And they were getting branded with this guy's, and this has nothing, I'm not linking this with this yet.
Right.
No, this is not happening as far as I know. But they're getting branded with this guy's initials. But he had the brand made so that it didn't look like his initials. And he apparently, had them convinced that he had no idea that this special group was going on with the branding. Anyway, it is really fascinating.
Wow.
I highly recommend looking into Nexium.
Okay.
There's a series on Netflix. The Vow. It's called The Vow.
Okay.
That is really excellent. Looks all into it. Anyway, so started kind of diving into that, and I've always been super fascinated with cults. I've watched every episode of all the Scientology shit and all of that. I've always been really fascinated by it. So when I started having these conversations with my former colleagues, and started to realize we had a leader, a very, very charismatic leader. And we were paying lots of money to go up level, keep going up more and more levels, keep paying more and more money,
right.
Volunteering our time and for real grueling work. And then some of the other things that really became apparent was this concept of what has been termed in the past called a thought terminating cliche, which is really used to shut down any independent thinking. So in these organizations, right, the worst thing that can happen is if somebody starts to question or listen to their gut. I was ignoring my gut.
Okay.
And so these thought terminating cliches, and it started to realize wow, so the three tenets of the style of yoga that I was doing, are be a yes, you are ready now, and give up what you must. And they're hanging huge on the wall at every training. Yeah. And I just remember any time that anybody would start to, including myself, would start to question or think differently, it was just be a yes. Be a yes.
Yeah.
And something else that we talk a lot about is trust the process. Trust the process.
And that's playing into a lot of those people that go to those trainings because we believe in the universe and we believe in energetic feelings and we believe that things work out in a way, but we also, there's got to be other reasonings behind that than just trust.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so looking at those, back at the time when I was really in it, I used those terms all the time. Right. I would use them in my classes here. Yeah. Be a yes. And it does have its place, right? Yeah. But when it's shown in the light of the idea of a thought terminating cliche, it has its place there too. Yeah, and that is to keep everybody, in this space. Another thing that has really become obvious is that some of the strategies and techniques used, for example, controlling food, controlling when people eat. Okay. Controlling their sleep deprivation, not letting people know what's going to happen next. These are all ways that to really get people to stop asking questions and to stop listening to their own intuition. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Controlling eating. How do you control eating at a place where you're expending that much energy? And the trainings that I was a part of, anytime we weren't doing yoga, we were snacking. trying to replenish energy, right? If we weren't actively doing yoga, we're chewing on like cashews or like fruit bars or something, to try to replenish energy.
Those trainings were very, very, very specific with when meals were. Everybody ate at the same time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there was an afternoon snack, and that was it. And everything's provided for you, and you can't. I mean, you're encouraged not to bring anything extra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. All right. So okay. So that was thought terminating cliches. That is such a terrible. That's such a terrible phrase. I've never heard that before. Thought terminating cliches. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
It was coined by a psychologist in the 50s, James Lifton, I believe his name was, and I think he did a lot of work with like Nazis and that sort of that era, but I think I like the term because it made me realize like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah,
that's exactly what that is.
Yeah, I never knew there was a term for it.
I can see them all over the place. Like they're in advertising. Everything is kind of culty.
Yeah.
Even advertising. So
well, I think advertising especially, we found out how to manipulate human minds, and we just use that to sell shitty things instead of like if we could reverse and use the idea that we know that how to sell like crappy sodas to people that we know soda kills people, it causes diabetes, causes cancer, it causes all these things, but we know how to tug at the heartstrings to get people to buy this cancer giving soda, right? Why don't we take that understanding that we have of how to sell things, how to tug at the heartstrings of the human beings and try to sell joy, try to sell a healthier lifestyle in some kind of way, try to sell the idea that you are in control of your own happiness. If you stop buying all this crap that we're trying to shove down your throat and actually search for your own happiness outside of the materialistic world.
It's not going to fund it's not going to make anybody any money.
Exactly. I know. Fucking
and then the money that goes
ideas.
All that money that goes to it's just.
Yeah, it's crazy. But it sucks because we've realized how to do the things that we need to do. We've just doing shitty things with those things. It's a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's gross.
Man. So what's, so when you're talking, so you have a community of people now that you're able to communicate with this and talk to, are there still people that you talk to that are like, you're crazy?
Well, interestingly, most of what I get from people who are still in it, because I guess this whole thing kind of started with some accusations against the Africa Yoga Project, which is sort of like a nonprofit arm of Baptiste Yoga.
Okay.
A group called No White Saviors wrote a pretty scathing report about, they had done an investigation into the funds and other things that were going on with Africa Yoga Project that were not above the line. They were pretty below the line, or the allegations of it were below the line.
Yeah.
And when that lid started to come off and people started to question, I think there just hadn't been any questions. Like everybody, I think, was sort of where I was, where if we had questions, we were just not asking
told to be a
them.
yes.
So people started to ask the questions of Africa Yoga Project, and then that kind of turned into like, let's ask the questions of Baptiste Yoga too. Something that is really shitty is that some of the people in the group that I'm in have been like stalked. How do I put this? It seems like early on there were people joining the group who were not questioning, who were still 100,000% drinking the Kool-Aid, which I used to say drinking the Kool-Aid like, hey, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. And now I'm like, oh yeah, I drank that Kool-Aid. And who there are now a bunch of fake like social media accounts that are kind of attacking people who are in this group and their businesses and their families, which is really shitty.
Wow.
That's really made me open my eyes to like, instead of having a conversation about it or taking like ownership for anything, there's something a little more sinister going on, which sucks.
Yeah. And just to draw another dotted line to another cult, that's exactly what happened with Bikram. I have friends that were involved in Bikram Circle that when they started to speak out, they become harassed. I was teaching at a yoga studio down the street in a different city that one of the people from Bikram's camp came to stalk the person that was in my class, and intimidate that person. And I had no idea till I was done with the class. I was actually trying to help this guy like figure out his yoga poses before COVID. And then come to find out, like, and I'm not saying like, I wouldn't have helped him, but like, yeah, he's behind the person that he was stalking, and I was helping him in class. And then I finally found out that this person was stalking this other person. I'm like, you need to let me know. I would have told that dude to leave. I would have escorted him out myself. But like, so I understand, like, that's when that level starts to happen. Anybody involved with that, you're doing something incorrect. Like, you shouldn't be sending people out to check on other people, to stalk other people, to intimidate other people. Yeah. Like, if you're part of that camp, you're on the wrong side. That sucks, but you're on the wrong side.
Well, and also there's this notion of, I've gotten this a couple of times. I reached out to a few affiliate studio owners that I'm friends with, just to ask what they're thinking, because that's a shitty place to have to be in right now, where you invested so much money, so much energy, so much time to have that name stamped on your business, right, and then to have this going on. But the response is typically like, well, I didn't experience any of that, or it was all great for me, which is a completely dismissive statement. Right. To say something like that is completely dismissing other people's experiences. Right. So that's been what my biggest observation of that response.
Well, I mean, it's almost, in a way, it's almost a thought terminating cliche. I was fine. I did great. Yeah. I was cool. I didn't have any experience. Well, cool. Okay. So, if even a small percentage of people have a bad experience, where like, it doesn't negate everybody's experience, but it should bring questions about why that person had a bad experience. Yes, great, you had a good experience, but this other person didn't.
Yeah, traumatizing.
Let's talk about that. Let's not dismiss them. Oh, I'm fine. Fuck them. That's basically what you're saying, right?
Because we're not talking about like bad customer service. We're talking about like a traumatic experience, or
Yeah, and that's I can imagine there's going to be some backlash with that, about having to remove the names and justify the trainings and all the things that happen from that. Man. So is there like formal investigations happening now that people have raised questions, or at least maybe moving towards the direction of?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet that I know of.
Yeah.
It's pretty low key. In fact, I'm even just having this conversation with you is nerve-wracking a little bit for me, but at the same time, I've been really wrestling with it so much over the last several months and years, really. I kind of informally left the organization, I would say probably 3 or 4 years ago, simply because I wasn't willing to pay for any more trainings. And if you stop going and paying for trainings, you're out. Like, you're off the website. You're not acknowledged anymore. Okay. And when that happened for me, I wasn't pissed or anything like that. I wasn't sad. I was more just like, what the fuck? Like, I spent all that money, and on one hand, I get it, where you have to keep growing and you have to keep evolving and training and learning and things like that. But it's just kind of like a shitty way to be. It makes me think of multi-level marketing in some ways.
Pyramid schemes and things like that.
Yeah. The minute you stop buying the stuff, or getting other people to buy it, or reaching a certain level, you're out.
Yeah. Wow.
And we could go down that road too. MLMs are pretty culty.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Most definitely.
That's a whole nother ball game. But speaking of that, there's another. Can I promote another podcast?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. No, only mine.
I know. I could talk for hours about the podcasts I love, but one of them that I love, and if this stuff is interesting to you, it's called A Little Bit Culty. Okay. And it's with a couple who were very, very high up in Nexium, and were actually the ones who left Nexium that blew up the whole scandal.
Put them on blast, yeah.
And they look into all kinds of really interesting cults, and MLM is one of them. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I'll leave links in the show notes for things like that.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, another thing that if you're into this, the Conspirituality podcast is excellent. And the guy who hosts that wrote a book called Conspirituality. Yeah. He wrote a book called Practice and Everything is Coming. And I'll get you his name, because you might want to put that in the show notes too. Totally. But he goes down the road of investigating Patabi Joyce and his all the allegations against him. I'm not sure if you know
I've a little bit about it, a little bit.
He interviews a ton of his victims.
Okay.
And I mean, that's like that right there. The fact that he still is revered as like the father of vinyasa, but
Right.
Ashtanga, and what he was doing to women.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
really, really jaw dropping and kind of gag reflexy.
Yeah.
Really.
It's
But
just,
it's no surprise when you look at that's where Bikram came from, and
Right.
they're learning from
Yeah.
their teachers.
right. Exactly. Yeah. You're learning what to
Mm-hmm.
do. And we need to deviate from this. We need to deviate. Like the people, when they get power, we've seen what happens. And not to say like Bikram has power or Baptiste has power, but they're in authoritative figures in the positions. And with that, there's that modicum of power that if you abuse it, it just keeps steamrolling, right? And then these things start to happen. So finding those healthy ways to embrace the responsibility you have as a guide, as a leader in whatever capacity, not letting that power go to your head. Like when I was involved with management teams, very different, but we still have teams of people that we're in charge of. That power can go to people's heads. I surrounded myself with people that questioned me like all the time, right? That always challenged me in what I was doing. On purpose. I don't want a bunch of yes people around me saying, Adam, you're great. Adam, you're smart. Adam, that was a great idea. It's like, hey, you know what? Here's all the holes in that idea you just put out there, and here's why that's going to suck, right? Build that type of team. Build the people around you that are going to question you, that are going to challenge you to make you a better human being, right? That's how we get away from that power struggle. That's how we get away from all that stuff of like...
Yeah, but in a yoga situation,
Yeah.
and I'll be the first to admit I tasted that. Like I tasted that so hard. You standing up on a podium in front of 80 people who are doing what you're telling them to do, even though they don't want to do it. Like
Yeah.
it's some pretty heady, powerful shit.
It
I mean,
is.
and I definitely walked around with that on for a while,
Yeah.
and I'm not proud of it. And I definitely feel like as much as we can just see it, step back and see that that's happening to us, and that it feels so good. It's hard to I don't know, to question it or to step away from it and like take a look at it. But
Yeah. It is. No, I get it. Yeah. I mean, it's like a drug, you're getting fueled that, and your endorphins go and your body chemistry starts to go. And it's like, oh, I'm the one doing the things.
And you're the teacher.
You're the
so
teacher.
they can't question you because you know best. You're the teacher.
Right.
That's sort of, the way that I was trained anyway was, I remember like, you don't take feedback from your students. They're not teachers.
Wow. Oh, man.
Big time.
And that's the antithesis of the training that I got.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the training that I got, and not just specifically the person that trained me, not saying that, but the people that I grew up around, like Tang, for example, Tang Wen, he was on the podcast a while ago. I, as a student still, not even having an inkling of wanting to teach, I can remember this gentleman coming out of class and telling Tang that, hey, I've got some feedback for you about your class. I thought it was too hot. I thought it was too difficult, all these things. And Tang said, hold on one second. Went and got a piece of paper and a pen and sat down next to the guy and took notes of exactly what that guy said. And I'm sitting across from them. I'm, not trying to pay attention, but I'm eavesdropping a little bit. And at that time, again, I wasn't wanting to be a teacher, but I'm a trainer. I'm a, corporate guy. I've run management teams and stuff like that. I've never seen a person take feedback like that before. That changed my life, right? And so like having people like that in my life, having those humble people that take the time to hear the feedback, that listen to what's going on and what's being said around them, that's the kind of the impact that I've been having on my career. Mm-hmm. And so in turn, try to have that impact as well. Mm-hmm. Somebody comes to me, says, hey, this is what I think. Cool. Give me a second. Let me write this down. So that antithesis of like, I'm the one, I'm the person, follow me. It's like, no, cool. No, we're just humans. What do you got? Yeah. It's interesting just to see the dichotomy, the difference between those two trainings.
Well, I think the thought is like, as a teacher, we're going to put our students into some pretty uncomfortable situations.
True.
You know, and part of yoga is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So you have to get into those uncomfortable situations. So there are times when I know, for me, my absolute favorite teacher is one of my best friends, and I there are times when I'm like in her class and I'm like, God damn it!
Yeah.
You're gonna make me do crescent lunge again. You know, like, and But in the end, at the end of the day, so that's I think that's the thought process of like, you don't want to take feedback from your students because you're intentionally making them uneasy or uncomfortable as a means to get to the goal.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see where there would be an opportunity to listen.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, and I can't remember if we were talking about this, but I was having a conversation maybe with somebody else, but when we're challenged, it almost strengthens the conviction that we have for doing the thing that we do. Right. And so that's why I love being challenged. Right. Why did you do eagle twice in a row on the right side?
Yeah.
I fucked up and forgot. Right. Or, you know what? That first one was to get the alignment. The second one was to get the depth in the hips. Thank you for asking the question. Now I'm going to do that again next week. You know, so I, you know, in turn love being questioned because then it strengthens my reasoning as to why. You know, if it kind of goes back to like our kids, right? Those of us that have kids, they go through that phase where they question everything. Why is the sky blue? Why is that thing orange? Why is this hot? If we just say, fuck off, it's hot because it's hot, just go watch TV, we're taking away their ability to be creative, ask creative questions in that thing. So it's that kind of same thing. It's like, hey, why did we do equal twice? Hey, shut up, go over there, student.
Right.
You don't know, right? I couldn't even want to explain it to you.
I had a plan for you.
Right.
That was all planned. Yeah.
Totally. It's like, no, man, let's talk about that shit, because your answer to that person might convince them that they want to do a teacher training. That convinces them that they might not want to do Eagle ever again. But that is going to give them something to marinate on rather than just trust me, go fuck off.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny. It reminds me of one of my favorite things to do as a teacher. I really do love getting people out of their comfort zones.
Yeah.
And is I would turn the room to face a different direction.
Ooh,
like
yeah.
to face away from the mirror. So I'd set my mat up like in a spot that it normally wouldn't be. And man, it's always so funny because it's such a trigger. Like people will come in, regulars will be like, what the hell are you doing? This is wrong.
Yeah,
this
right.
is not right. But inevitably I'd have a student who would be their first time. And I'm like, hey, Billy, what's the front of the room? And he'd be like, well, we're facing the front of the room. Like, so it's kind of all perspective,
totally,
right? Like, is this really wrong or is it just different from what you're used to?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you ever start on left first instead of right?
I don't
either.
Ooh.
I can't.
Wow, that would be challenging.
I know. I've had teachers that do that. They're like, I'm going to change it up and start left. I'm like, you're just going to do that on the fly? I would screw the entire class up.
I don't know how. I don't think I could do that.
No, not at all.
Wow. And I think as a student though, it would be very impactful, because if I had a teacher doing that, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you making me do this the whole time? Like thinking in my head, like they've lost it. They've just lost their mind.
Yep. Yeah, there was a woman, Marva, that used to teach.
Oh, I remember
Yeah,
Marva.
She's the best. I love her.
Yeah.
But yeah, she would do left every once in a while. She's like, we're going to do left today. I'm like, God, how do you do that? Just randomly drop a left side flow on everybody? Shit.
That's next level.
I'd be confused for like the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. That is so funny.
Oh, man. So with are you still unpacking, some stories and some ideas, some understandings?
Like every
it's still
day,
starting
it
to come
almost
back?
seems like every day I'll remember something.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, like I remember assisting and being on the wellness person, and this woman coming up to me she's like, just couldn't even handle. It's like day 3, which is always the breaking.
Okay.
Through day 3 is usually the day that everybody breaks and has their freak out, and then the rest of the time seems to be a little smoother.
Yeah.
But it was day 3, and she was just absolutely beside herself about like sleep deprivation and the food situation, and this is totally not okay, and this is not healthy, and I just remember standing there, and there was nothing I could do. Like I felt the only thing I could do was not internalize her complete like freak out on me.
Yeah.
She was freaking out on me. Like there wasn't any way around it. I was just a safe space for her to do it because of my role.
Right.
But it does seem like every day I have another memory of like, oh yeah, this practice that we did. One of the trauma bonding exercises that I experienced was late night, probably day 4, level 2, at my level 2, after, you're absolutely freaking exhausted. And we had just done like a 3-hour, really, really dark hip opening, like Yiddish kind of practice, right? So everyone's raw as fuck. Like there's no veneer.
In the hips.
Yeah. Oh. And then the instruction was pair up with the person next to you, sit so that your faces are like 3 inches apart, and you each have to speak for I think it was 3 or 5 minutes. It was timed, without stopping talking, one person at a time, and the topic is your deepest, darkest secrets. Go.
What?
And you had to fill the space for 5 minutes.
Wow.
And with a complete stranger.
Wow.
Yeah, and then listen to their.
Wow. That's a lot of work to ask somebody to do. That's like years of therapy to get people ready for that shit.
Oh,
and
my
you're just
God.
asking them just to do it on the flip of a switch.
And then after that, we were put in noble silence. It was called noble silence. Until after breakfast the next morning. So to just take what you had just heard and listen to. Obviously, I think the point of that probably is that you're not going to go blab your shit to your roommate. But I just remember that being one of the most... Hey, here I go. This is me talking out both sides of my mouth again. One of the most profound experiences I'd ever had.
Yeah.
But also, like, that was entirely fucked up.
Yeah.
And definitely deserves some kind of processing or, mental health assistance.
Yeah.
After.
Yeah. I mean, I exactly what you just said. Like, to me, that is a great exercise that if you're prepared to do that, my God, be vulnerable, get all that shit out. Don't sit on it. But you got to be prepared to be that person, to be that vulnerable. That's not just healthy to start unplugging and unraveling some shit that maybe you've forgotten about, and then not have this emotional support to, one, be the active listener to accept the thing that this person is just now like delving out to you, but also to deal with the shit that you've figured out about yourself. That's a lot. And again, great work if you can do it. That's not work we should run away from, but be prepared to do that work. Have the support to do that work. Be emotionally supported, physically supported to be able to do that work, not at a flippant teacher training.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where I'm wrestling is like some of these experiences that were the most profound for me.
Right, yeah.
Where I witnessed and observed very traumatic for some people.
Right.
And I think it just depends on how you're showing up and where you are in your life and sort of what you've dealt with and what you haven't dealt with. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, the trauma bonding thing that reminds me, I had a friend that went to a teacher training in the Seattle area at a Baptiste studio, Baptiste, affiliated studio, I guess. And she told me that about an experience that she had where she got called out. Everybody had to come up into and stand in the middle of the circle. And I think there was about 20 people in this training. And you would come up and you had to like say the first like traumatic thing that happened to you, like that popped into your head. Like just like say that thing out, right? And just like the group would accept it and like have these things, right? And you would just like have these moments where you would just like speak your, I think it was like speak your truth. I think that's what they called it. But it was these traumatic things that happened to you that you had to speak. And so this young lady got up there and she was speaking her truth, quote unquote. And the woman that was running the training stopped, like as she's speaking her truth and she's being vulnerable, trying to in her own way, the woman running the training stopped her and said, "You're not actually active, not actually working into this exercise. You're lying to yourself. You need to dig deeper. You need to be more vulnerable." And it's like, how are you going to tell somebody that just shared something? You have no idea how much strength it took them to share, to tell them they're not being vulnerable enough and they're not strong. They're beating them down. That person left that training, didn't finish the training, and is not teaching yoga right now. So
it's not surprising.
Yeah. I mean,
that's a very common technique used, especially at like the studio level to really try to break people down.
Right.
At whatever cost.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
That's like, honestly, that's like Guantanamo Bay shit, right? That's head psych shit, right? Where we're just messing with people's psyche, break them down to build them up in the way that we feel they should be built. Now that defies, like, I'm not Buddhist. I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person. I have, inklings of what's going on in the world. But I love the idea of in Buddhism that you see the inner Buddha in everybody, not the Buddha you wish them to be, but their actual inner Buddha, because there is one in every single person. You call it Christ consciousness. You call it whatever you want to, right? But that being that's inside of you is the perfect being. It doesn't need to be manipulated. It doesn't need to be changed. It just needs to be recognized, right?
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that you say that, because one of the techniques of Baptiste Yoga trainings is that they get you to identify really early on the lie or the story that you tell yourself, which is basically some version usually of I'm not good enough, right? So to identify that. And now, in identifying that story or that lie, there's a lot of power there,
right?
Because you can identify when that is creeping up into your head and making you small, right? But it also is another technique where if you keep playing on that, you keep playing on that concept, it's always something that needs to be fixed.
Right.
So there's another training for that. There's another training to help you fix that story or lie that you tell yourself, right? Like you're never quite there yet.
Right.
So that's been kind of interesting for me to also unpack.
Yeah.
In this whole wild ride.
Yeah. Man. God,
Yeah.
there's just so many layers.
It's been a wild ride for me because my identity was wrapped up into this shit tightly for a really long time.
Right.
Like that was, so pulling it away. And in fact, when I was filling out the questionnaire that you sent me, and there was a section of like your accomplishments or something like that. Like typically my number one accomplishment would be like 500-hour Baptiste train, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, ew, I don't want to put that on there. Like, I don't want to have that attached anymore. So,
well, it's still a notable accomplishment. It really is. It still is a notable accomplishment. You've done a lot with the trainings that you have. So I think that's the other part of this too is that just because I won't even call it fallen victim, but just because you're associated with this person, this training, doesn't mean that it didn't benefit you, right? You still,
exactly.
like you said yourself, talking out of both sides of your mouth,
Yep.
because it did
Both
uplift
can be
you.
true.
Yeah,
Both
totally.
can be true. Yeah.
So I think that's maybe personal work that the people that went through those trainings have to find that honesty with being honest with themselves about the things that they don't agree with, but also embracing those things that did positively be affected in their lives because of this thing that happened. Like we can't should all over ourselves. I should have done this. I should have done that. So
always shitting all over myself.
I do all the time. Right. Well, it's like you said, those practices. It's like those practices that we have that we rely on, but we forget. We have those practices like, oh, I know this thing works. This thing gets me out of this place. This thing makes me calm. But then when I'm hyperventilating, I forget the thing that makes me calm because I'm in fight or flight.
You got to make it a habit. Yeah,
exactly.
So you can pull it out of your back pocket.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I've, it's interesting. I was actually talking to a mutual friend of ours, and a few weeks back, and she was saying some things about the her questioning Baptiste and her questioning some of the trainings that she's gone to, and getting some kind of flack from some of the local teachers that have similar trainings, and so I'd be interested to see like, what the kind of response is going to be as things start to come out. Because like you said, there's a lot of people that hang their hats on that style of training. I did this thing. I made this accomplishment. And are we going to defend it now? Or are we going to demonize it? Are we going to find good in it? I'm just going to be interested to see what those steps are. Yeah,
it will be interesting to see how it plays out. There are other things that I didn't witness or experience that I'm not bringing up in this podcast. But if people did a little bit of research, they might easily see some other things that are the accusations that are coming to light that I think will probably make whatever's going to happen faster. I don't know what else to say that except for the stuff that we talked about today is questionable and probably and not great, but there are other things that are coming to light that.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that you're speaking to your truths. You're speaking to what's happened to you and things that you've witnessed personally, not things that you've heard. And that's, I think, where we get a little dicey in conversations like this is, I've heard a lot about Baptiste and about these other things, but I've never experienced them.
Yeah,
So I can't speak to those directly. What I can do is learn from those experiences and learn the triggers that happened around those people and learn the things of, like we talked about with power struggles, right? Learn how to stay away from those power struggles, how to humanize ourselves because we are humans. I'm not better, worse, indifferent than anybody else. But, but we get put on those pedestals, literally, sometimes those podiums. And we're looked at in that light that can be intoxicating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will be very interesting. I do, the vast majority of the wonderful, amazing people that I've met in this journey, the community that I created, are still very much involved and might probably not even know that this rumbling is happening. I don't even really know, to be honest. I think maybe if they are aware of it and aren't, involved in the conversation. But the people that I really feel for probably the most are the affiliate owners who, and I bet that I wasn't part of the Bikram experience, but I would imagine that was very painful and hard for people who had the name like literally stamped on their walls and everything. Like, holy shit, now what do we do?
Yeah.
How do we find our identity? And, and it's that also goes to like the practice of journey into power, which is for the Baptiste practice that we teach and learn, the sequence. I remember hearing when the Bikram thing was happening, and I love the practice of Bikram.
I do too,
I remember the whole thing like, well, shit, I get benefit out of the practice. And you can love the practice and not the person. Yeah,
right.
Right. And
well, that's why we call Bikram yoga hatha in the Northwest.
Right, Yeah.
I mean, in general, hatha is Bikram. Generic yoga. Yeah. Right. And if in India, like hatha means yoga, like active movement yoga.
But in the Northwest, it's Bikram.
Exactly. In the Northwest,
I remember
it's Bikram.
moving here and being like, taking a hatha class and be like, oh wait, this is Bikram. Yeah. Oh, we're just not using the word. Got it. Okay. I got check that off. I understand now.
I wonder what the offshoot of Baptiste will be.
It'll
if that
probably
ever
just
comes
be
to that.
hot power yoga or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. But
do you still teach? Are you still teaching like the strict, like the Baptiste style?
I really do. Okay. Yeah, I love it. It is so. It's what I prefer to practice. I love taking that sequence, and I change it up a little bit, but I really stick for the most part with that sequence.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've like I said, I've quite a few friends that are Baptiste teachers taking your class, like Joe Parsons, Katie Tavog, amazing teachers. And I love their styles and I love the consistency of their practices. And, I can personally say that I do get something out of the practice as well. I've never taken any Baptiste trainings. I've not read Journey into Power. I don't teach that style. I do teach a vinyasa style, power-ish type style, but more transition based and things like that.
Yeah, I love your classes because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, it's going to keep you on your toes.
You just never know what's going to happen, and that's exciting.
Yeah, right. Thank you, I appreciate that. But yeah, I really do appreciate the style but I can say that I appreciate the style because of the teachers that teach it. Like because of people like yourself, right? So, I could say that the good that came out of your training has been felt and has been appreciated and has been nourished.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That
So I'm happy that you went through your trainings to get the experience you needed. I'm very proud of you for speaking up and having this voice to step forward and be one of the first people that I know of to start to talk about stuff like this. And, if there's, as things more start to come out, if we want to get back on here and talk some more about it, happy to do it.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming out and sharing with this, we'll leave, you've introduced me to some Instagram pages and things like that have had some good information about it.
Yep.
And, so I'll leave stuff like that in our show notes and where to find that.
I'll send you, information about the book I was talking about, Practice and Everything is Coming.
Cool. That's really interesting. And a couple other books, cultish organizational books if people are into that stuff, like I am. Yeah. And it's good to know about it so we can prevent it. It's good to understand the inner workings of and the things that lead into those instances so we can stop it.
Yeah. I think it all comes down to your gut. Like when you start not trusting it, that's when it's important to kind of pick your head up and look around and really question what's going on.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you like what we're doing and share it with your friends. Let's get that community growing. We'll see you next time. Obeisance and love to you all.